Now take us back to your Australian friend introduces you to Jeffrey Epstein.
She had a sense that he was someone too tough for her to handle. She said, I kind of got to know him a bit and I realised he's a bit too much of a player for me to really seriously consider him as a boyfriend. But she knew I sort of liked that very sort of smart, super verbal, funny New York, high-speed kind of personality. And so she said, I was thinking it could be someone interesting for you to meet. And this was not done, I hasten to add, in any sleazy way at all. It was more, out of all the men out there in New York, you should really meet him. But I know that I can't take on that level of player. Now, the context was Playboy, and at that point, it was way more James Bond than Darth Vader. He was somebody that was known as many a girl on his arm, lots of girlfriends. He eventually, when I met him, I realised he had that sort of smarmy self-satisfaction of like, oh, women would love to take me down and they never will, And when I actually met him...
What do you mean women would like to take him down but they never will?
I think, when someone's very wealthy, they're on their guard and they like to use the fact that on paper they're an object of desire for women that want to be with a wealthy man.
Okay.
So he knew that.
So
he knew that.
Fending people off.
Well, I think he enjoyed it. And I guess part of our dynamic when I met him, I actually, and it's sort of hard to say because I never, ever, ever want to be an apologist for someone that caused so much destruction and destroyed so many lives. But if I'm being really honest, my lived experience was we became friendly. And that's the actual truth. It's like it's a whole kaleidoscope. It's a very complex situation. And my little, shard of glass in the kaleidoscope that I'm just contributing to the picture is initially when I met him, he did have a charm and we sought out each other's company and we did hang out in a non-sexual way.
And you spent, how long was he a friend of yours for?
Oh, for years. For years, like especially in that early period where we were, he'd be someone I'd call. He would call back, or he would call me. At that time, we had answering machines, and God knows where those little cassettes are. But so it was like there was a 2.5, 3 year period where it was at its apex.
And you met Donald Trump through him, right?
Yes, and as a precursor to the Donald Trump encounter, I have to say, by that time, I'd also sort of realised he's a black diamond run of a man, way too much for me to handle. I'm a romantic, so I knew there's no way that I'm going to just be a part of a harem. And that was considered attractive at the time. In a post-Me Too world, everyone's like, oh, gross. But at that time, it just made you a player. And it was a value, and people, it was shiny, And at that point, also, people behaving outrageously was something that I sought out, and it was part of the fashion world.
And it was part of the 80s and the 90s, wasn't it? I mean, Wall Street was on at the movies. This was about money. It was about glitz. It was about glamour. And you were living in that in your day job because you were dressing up as that. And then in the evenings, you were actually living it.
Exactly. And also when you're modelling, when you're doing couture, this whole idea that a Parisian designer like Yves Saint Laurent, he's basically liberating women from stifling bourgeois convention by this highly eroticized sexual glamour. So in my hilariously undercooked teenage, youthful, book smart life, completely naive way, I thought I got the players and the world, and I was like navigating. But even then, I thought, there's no way I can take on a Jeffrey Epstein, in terms of being auditioning him or him auditioning me for partner material. But we instantly slipped into a friendly catch-up mode. And he was someone who was always super busy. He didn't really do like 4-hour lunches in a cafe. He'd be like, hey, I'm going to the airport. Why don't you come in the car and we'll hang out, and then the car can take you back wherever you want to go. He was always on the run. And then one day he'd spoken about Donald Trump as someone that, he kind of he was kind of a bit self-satisfied about that friendship, I think, because at that point Donald Trump was, larger than life, almost like cartoon-like character in the New York landscape. And he mentioned, I had this white wrap-over dress. And he said, oh, my God, you look just like a nurse in that. It'd be really fun if we got this other mutual friend that had introduced us. Why don't we both go over to Donald's and you'll both look like nurses and I'll just knock on the door and we'll go to Trump Tower and it'll be hilarious. And it kind of, you know, looking back, obviously, it's like there's something kind of mortifying about that story, about me putting myself in that Benny Hill position, and being like sort of on Jeffrey's arm going to Donald Trump's. It's completely surreal. I mean, right. It's really mental. But at the time, it just felt like a bit of fun. And obviously now I look back and go, okay, it's a very odd story, and especially when it blew up into this global horror show. You know? So
take us back to, so you're sauntering over town, across town, from Jeffrey's house on East 71st Street to, was this Trump Tower you go to meet Donald Trump?
Yeah, we went to Trump Tower and we get ushered up. And so I suppose there was a sense of anticipation. And I wasn't that invested in Donald Trump, but anyone that lived in New York at that time knew he was an outsized figure. He was like a Macy's Day Parade float of a man, you know. And then, you know, so then...
Great description.
And I don't know, you know, I'm pretty sure that I remember the doors being sort of having all this kind of embedded Byzantine detail, like, you know, like this Persian prince that we're going to see on the other side. And then when the doors sort of swung open, the two things that really hit you, one is the outrageous skyline. I mean, it's just, it's just the embodiment of all aspirational New York desire.
I mean, the view from his windows.
Unbelievable. I remember that. And I also remember the OTT, outrageously opulent Romanian dictator look of the I honestly, it was shocking. Like, it actually blew my mind. And I'd been in very opulent French spaces, but this was on steroids. And so I remember blurting out, a good thing I didn't wear silver earrings, you know, and just being a smartass. And we came in and he was gracious, and I think he offered us a drink, and Jeffrey was sort of a little bit, cat that got the cream, like a little bit, aren't I cool, aren't I great, aren't I fun? And there wasn't anything really seedy or sexual or weird apart from the aspect of us being sort of trophies on display. He was really invested in us knowing about, I bought this, I got that, I paid the most at the auction. You know, he was really, really invested in making a good impression, which I found startling. I just could not believe that sort of chasm of need in him. Like, it really, really blew my mind.
And what was the relationship like between him and Jeffrey?
They seemed warm and friendly, you know. Jeffrey was kind of a bit boasty about knowing Donald. You know, Donald was much more famous than him at that time, you know. So I think he loved kind of accentuating the connection. He probably was showing off Donald to us and us to Donald, you know. And I mean, look, at that time, you know, he was a soap opera.
So this was part of your New York adventure?
It was just an adventure, and Donald Trump was just another, you know, I'd done a show and shaken Diana's hand. It was like meet Godzilla. This is just another, you know.
Princess Diana.
Diana, Princess of Wales. It was like all these towering figures that you just ended up meeting them. It's very surreal to look back at now. There was no weird, dark sexual undercurrent. He was gracious. I do remember...
Where did he look? Because there's you, your friend, you're both dressed in tiny little white dresses that Jeffrey thinks give off a nurse vibe. Is Donald responsive to that?
He smiled. He smiled and he laughed. And he obviously thought, this is just Jeffrey. Because obviously Jeffrey's thinking, I'm literally walking down Fifth Avenue with two nurses. This is, that he smiled and he laughed, but not in a way that made me uncomfortable at the time. And it's really, really, I feel so exposed telling this story in a way. But it is, you know, let's face it, it's the oddest thing in the world to be remembering that story, considering everything that's swirling around all these, you know, seismic events globally now. I mean,
so does he invite you in, and do you spend time? Do you have a drink?
Yes, he was gracious, but I remember he was extremely eager to please, in the sense of this very odd Gatsby-esque need for us to know how much things cost, and I found that a little bit odd and needy and very bizarre. But there was definitely no seedy undercurrent. I have to say that.
And what was Jeffrey's relationship like with Donald Trump?
He spoke about him as somebody that I think he felt that that was at a time when Donald Trump was going through some bankruptcy issues, and he definitely he kind of was a little boasty about the fact he lent him his plane, and I've helped him out a lot, and definitely the sense that he was the power center at the time. Definitely that was how he spoke of it in those terms.